The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those knuckleheads of liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming at you on April 27th, 2022. And we have a little escape from you today from this, just this disaster of an administration that we're living through. But before we get to that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the Word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower left-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And we also have a special guest today, and that's our departure on the show today. We're going to be interviewing Kalish Morrow, and she is the current mayor of the city of Hanford, California. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. Kalish, we've interviewed you before on the show, and you got a chance to tell us a little bit about your background. And you've just been elected back in the 2020, the infamous last election. that was pretty exciting for the entire country. But you came on in January to tell us a little bit about it, and now you've been there for over a year. And so we wanted to have you back to tell us a little bit about what it's like being a libertarian, elected libertarian in office, and governing. So, and by the way, James, can you pull up the image real quick? So this is Hanford, California, just for our guests, so they kind of understand where this is, because it's such a rare thing when a libertarian gets elected. We just wanted to let you know where the unicorn lives. And here it is, Hanford, California, and I believe that's the town right there. So there we go. Kalish, tell us about some of your successes. What's it like governing as a libertarian?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me back on. I had a lot of fun the last time. Tim, you're not in your cockpit this time.
That was now I remember.
Yeah. I remembered you. Once he said screaming eagle, I remembered.
Yeah. Well, when they send you out to swap airplanes, you don't get back in time for the podcast, so you got to do something.
It made for a great backdrop, though.
It did. Yeah. Okay. How are we doing here?
It's been really great so far. I mean, definitely you got these crazy times and ups and downs and polarization going on even at the local level too. So just navigating some of those things, and there's been some, bumps in the road with our council, and it's kind of crazy to go through some of the things that we do and still function as a very cohesive council on a lot of things. To the point where, we get along so well that I have council members in other cities that will be like, oh my God, you guys have to watch their council meetings. It's weird. They don't scream at each other. They don't, they don't call each other names. So at least we have that going for us. But yeah, it's been a little, it is weird because weird in a good way, I guess. I started off as a council member, and people aren't familiar with some structures of different local governance. Ours is what you would call a weak mayoral system, or it's ran by the day-to-day operations are ran by a city manager. So for us, we rotate amongst ourselves regarding who's going to be vice mayor and who's going to be mayor. So every year we do that reorganization. So a year in, I went from council member to vice mayor, and then something contentious happened, regarding a low-income housing project. And again, that volatility that we have in politics and stuff, it really got one base really fired up, and things didn't go very well for our mayor during a meeting. And unfortunately, she lost her temper. And at that point, the council decided to do a reorg, and I got bumped. We swapped places, so I got bumped to mayor and bumped down to the vice mayor. And so that's how I transitioned so quickly to mayor after just getting elected in for the first time.
How long ago was this, Kalish?
About a month ago.
Okay.
So definitely trial by fire, which I feel has been my whole tenure on council. The moment I got onto council, we had to censure a council member for some misconduct. I won't get into that, but there was that, and then obviously this huge blow up and the reorg at an untimely, what's not the normal time, and then kind of running meetings too, where we're still dealing with the topic that was so contentious, and just trying to make sure that I keep the everybody as calm and collected as possible, and council members, council moving and stuff. And I had to channel my inner Mimi Robson, chair of the California State Party. I've learned a lot from her, just how she conducts meetings and just trying to keep a level head and those things. So learned a lot from her, and we're moving forward.
How large is your council?
We have 5 members. And you'd be interested to know, too, that 3 out of the 5 of us are libertarians.
Wow.
Yeah.
3 out of 5.
Yep. That was, we have a Democrat and a Republican filling the other 2 spots. When I got elected on, Francisco Ramirez was mayor. He became mayor at the time, or he was mayor at the time when he decided to switch parties and become Libertarian as well. So he was already, on city council. A few months later, we had another council member who's Republican. He decided, not that that has anything to do with him leaving, but he decided for personal matters that he wanted to leave council a little bit early. Time with family, that kind of thing. And we decided to make an appointment to fill a seat, to finish the rest of his term. And we selected Amanda Saltre out of a serious pool of candidates. And within a couple months, she decided to switch to Libertarian as well.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't run as libertarians, and obviously there was some influence, I guess, and they realized that the party really resonates with them, and I think it also takes care of that stigma. As you mentioned too, the unicorn of having somebody get elected as a libertarian, even though we're a nonpartisan race, there's still that stigma that we don't get elected, and so seeing that I had a very, very difficult race against a Republican incumbent in a red city, and I still won, I think that kind of boosted their confidence and helped them get over that line.
Well, Kalish, one thing you mentioned that these other 2 people had switched parties, and I remember you telling us in the prior time you were on the show that you had originally been a Democrat and then had sort of been disillusioned and switched to being a Libertarian. Were these other people who had switched from Democrats, or did they switch from Republican, or maybe a third party?
I believe Francisco Ramirez had been, he's dabbled in a few of the parties, but I think where the last one he was part of was Democrat. And then Amanda was definitely Republican. And again, she felt that the party had left her, so she decided to go no party preference, and then eventually made the leap to Libertarian.
Oh, it's just a good sign that we're drawing from both parties.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it goes to that argument too, because you hear it all the time of people saying like, oh, if it weren't for the Libertarians, the Republican candidate would have won, or if it weren't for them, the Democrat would have won. And we just say like that's not a guarantee. We're neither Republican nor we're Democrat. And if you were to actually split us down the middle and gun to our head and we had to pick one of them, it would probably be split down the middle. I don't think that we would have swayed it one way or another.
Oh.
Okay.
So what I mean, you're in what you call a red city. I mean, meaning it predominantly leans right or leans Republican. Well, what do you think now? Do you see as the differences between governing as a Libertarian versus the governance of the previous Republican administrations?
I think it gets a little muddied. I think at the local level, if you're in the state senate or anything like that, you've definitely got those party lines. But I think when it comes down to local issues, people really have to look at the issues, up close and personal, and now it's a decision that's affecting your neighbors and your own life. But that said, though, I noticed a lot of Republicans who will still do the pet projects, that were still advocating for increases in taxes, those sorts of things, even here at the local level. So yeah, that's been one of those things, though. My predecessor, people liked certain things about her and didn't like certain things about her, but I have to say, like, I went in and she was wanting to raise taxes and was all about it, and we've got staff that are just like, but no, wait, why don't you want to do it too? So it's that balancing act too, because everybody wants more services, but we also don't want to pay more taxes. So it's kind of like, well, you guys have to make the decision. I know where I stand, but they have to figure it themselves out.
Sure. Okay.
Well, have you experienced any successes so far there? I mean, and I know it's only been a year, so that's not a lot of time, but it'd be curious to see how you guys are doing.
Yeah, what's funny is that just recently we did our annual goal setting meeting, and our city manager sat down to talk with the facilitators of that meeting, and she wanted to hear about what Hanford's done over the past year, and he just went, well, and rolls this whole thing out of just success after success after success, and she just went, oh wow. And he's like, yeah, now I'm worried that council has this really high expectation, and I don't know if we can maintain that this coming year. So I mean, I'll pat myself on the back a little bit there. Definitely, it was a group effort, though. We have an amazing team, staff members. There's been a changeover in the last couple of years too, with people who are go-getters. So definitely a team effort. But I would say one of the biggest things for me, and it was a campaign promise too, was to start undoing restrictive zoning that we had. So we had this, antiquated 30-year-old plus zoning that was protective zoning. Only certain businesses could be in downtown, or certain businesses had to be in downtown, and they couldn't go out to the other commercial zones. And really what that ended up creating was like a financial district because of the type of businesses, services and banks and those kinds of things. So we have like a 9 to 5 downtown, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. There's no nightlife. Everybody's closed on Sundays, that sort of thing. And then at the same time, our mall is dying. They haven't been able to go with the times. We've got another commercial development too on the other side of town that hasn't been able to fill spots. Like it's been bad for everybody all along. And so I had to push back, and luckily the rest of the council was on board with it, and including our staff too, and we were able to undo that zoning. And there was still the outcry from what we would call the old guard, but we were able to push it through, and Hanford's not falling apart like they thought they would. So that was a great accomplishment. And then the other thing too was this past winter, it was our inaugural event for what we call the Winter Wonderland. And basically it's this huge ice skating rink in the middle of our downtown, our civic park. And it just like our Parks and Rec team just blew it up. They worked with our Main Street program, because one of the stipulations too was that we needed cost recovery. This wasn't just going to be the subsidized event that we're going to be in the hole for. So council set a minimum of meeting maybe 75% return and our cost recovery. And they did so well in sponsorships, and it was such a huge event it hit such a huge attraction that we got over 90% cost recovery. Plus all the added bonus to our small businesses that surround that area, who obviously took some of the biggest hits during COVID, and for them to get this big boost in their sales, and for the restaurants, those sorts of things, that I think that there was like the added bonus too. And we probably recovered even more money just through sales tax alone, just from the governance side of things. But yeah, it's huge, and just so many, kind of like a healing moment too, with everything that's gone on, just to have so many people coming out and enjoying that.
So the last time that you were on the show with us, it was 2020. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, or 2020. It might have been just after the election. I think Early 2021, yeah.
Early 2021. Oh yeah, okay. So at that time, you guys were going through probably some of the COVID problems. How did your city manage to get through COVID?
Well, we weren't big on the mandates at all. We allowed businesses to operate however way they wished to. If they wanted to ignore state laws, nobody was going to enforce it on our end, and that helped keep our businesses going. We didn't do. There were no vaccine mandates or mask mandates, anything of that sort. So we ended up faring pretty well, and I think it also helps too. We're a rural community, and these mandates are one size fits all. And I keep saying, the biggest thing that you can do, the safest thing that you can do in a plague is to not live in a city and be right on top of each other, as history has told us. So I think us being rural definitely helped. We definitely had lower, vaccine rates and everything, and that's all, personal choice. Again, like we weren't going to enforce any of those things, and it was at a point too where I knew where council stood, and I knew that our staff wasn't going to even push it on us. And I don't know if they even wanted to, maybe the unions and stuff, but I ended up having one of the firefighters I know, he came up to me at one point and said, "Hey, so the union's really concerned that the city's going to follow what the rest of the state's doing and mandate vaccines for firefighters. And I just have to tell you, if you guys do it, we've got at least half the firefighters are going to walk." And I said, "Not this council. This council is not doing that." And then to take it a step further, I put forth a resolution, or I asked for a resolution, and our staff put it together for us. But basically, with stipulations of we wouldn't support any mandates, and we weren't also going to restrict businesses who were choosing to enforce certain rules too, because I think that goes the opposite. The pendulum swings the opposite way too. So just no force at all. Yes. So that was part of it, but I also wanted to be like, this isn't meant to be anti-vaccine or anti-mask or anything. It was just about us maintaining control over our own community. And that's when our city manager got the brilliant idea too, to add in basically local control. So what made this resolution so significant was that other aspect of the resolution that called for us being all about local control, and that took out some of the other red tape too, that layer of bureaucracy. So now when things are coming down from the state that threatens local control, one of us just has to email the city manager, or if he catches wind of it, he might email us and just see, kind of where we stand, and he'll instantly get a letter of support or opposition out. Without having to wait, a couple weeks for a council meeting and for us to approve and all that sort of stuff. So it sped it up, and some of these things are really time sensitive. So it was definitely an important resolution that came out of COVID, but is going to help us out in perpetuity. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Kalish, before we get away from COVID, though, with the approach you guys took, how did you guys do with COVID? Was it, did you guys fare well with COVID there, or was it a bigger problem than in other areas, or how did you guys do?
I mean, we obviously still did better than any of the cities. I can't remember the last numbers. I mean, I think that we were still, about average for the rest of the state. But again, we didn't fare any worse than the cities that had the strictest of mandates either. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that just goes to show it's like that was the same thing nationwide. It didn't make a difference if you had mandates or not. Everybody was just kind of going through it. It's really just the strain on your medical system, which, unfortunately, I wish that we had more hospitals, and that's just a problem that everybody's had for a while.
Yeah.
So nobody was pining for Cuomo to show up and run the show for you.
No, I don't think anybody wanted any COVID patients put in a nursing home. So there's that. This brings up another question I wanted to sort of get at. And, had these libertarian leanings before you got elected.
has your perspective changed at all since you've been working in government? Have you become a little more laissez-faire, a little less laissez-faire? I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I'm still feel like I'm pretty neutral. I mean, I know I'm a lot more aware of the balancing act that I've got to do, where sometimes I do have to really examine my libertarian philosophies and think like, okay, is this for the benefit of others or not? One thing too, and Brent Olson is a great sounding board for me a lot of times too. So we talked about, okay, these special taxes in certain areas, or even I'm sorry, not that the impact fees for builders. That's what I meant to say. So you got certain areas and stuff, so you got impact fees, but initially I'd be against raising those, but then there's a point of, well, it's kind of like a user fee too. And if the city's struggling to provide the services and, the inevitability is raising taxes, what about service fees? Because it's a one-time thing and the developer carries that. And yes, it gets passed on to the consumer too, but it's by choice. So, it's those kinds of things where you really have to look at some of your philosophies a little bit more under a magnifying glass, and not just having that blanket statement of like taxation is theft and all that, which I mean, I still believe that.
Well, it's not theft if you agree to buy the house with the fees the way they are. Then it just you made a decision. No longer theft at that point.
No, I agree. So that's again, it's those balancing acts of I don't like that it drives up cost, but it's still taxation would drive up costs even more, and it sometimes is not equally distributed too. So the burden isn't equally distributed.
But I think this is one of those things that libertarians in general struggle with, is because if you're not an anarchist, then you believe that there's some level of government that's appropriate. And if you do, then the statement of taxation is theft, it's sort of like, well, how are we going to pay for government if we think that there's some government that's necessary? And of course, what you're saying, well, user fees, that kind of is almost the most direct way around it, instead of just taking from people who are completely disconnected from whatever the decision is.
But for libertarians, it always you always have to ask the question, and Jason, you're right. You always have to ask the question: where do you draw the line, right? If we're gonna agree that government has to do some services, something, whether it's at the federal level, the military, whatever, or the local level, whatever services you want to provide, you still have to ask the question: where do you draw the line? And this would be a good question if Kalish could give us some idea of how does she come to that bright line where you say this is what the government should do and this is what the government should not be doing. Do you ever have that sort of conflict within your governance duties?
Yeah, it's always looking at what is the purview of government, and we've got you've got public safety and you've got infrastructure, those sorts of things that are absolutely necessary for us to have those creature comforts that we've come to enjoy. But then there's other things too that are beyond the purview of government that we really have to dial back on at times. Our parks department too usually is the first one to get some cuts and stuff. They always want to expand their budget, but have to come in and be like, well, is this really necessary? Well, yes, we need to do blah 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 blah. It's like, okay, but we also need wastewater treatment upgrades too over here. That's going to cost the same amount of money. We're going to have to go in this route. So, it's those types of things. And then I even, I've gotten into arguments with staff too about certain things of, our ordinances where over carports or whatever. But that is enforcement, and that costs us money as well to go out and enforce some of these codes. And I've just said, are we a city or are we a homeowners association? And they don't like that because there's always this argument, but oh no, we've got to keep our city looking. Okay, well, it sounds like an HOA to me, but
Well, Kalish, are there any pet projects you have or anything else that's sort of something to push toward liberty? Anything that you think that you might want to be pushing toward in the future?
Well, I think I've had to go back and reevaluate some of my things, because I was able to get a lot of my campaign promises done pretty quickly. And, aside from one of the important things was expanding this park that's near me, that's really near and dear to a lot of people. That's got a whole other host of issues and problems to solve with doing that, and trying to do it as fiscally responsible as possible. But, I've come to realize, though, with a lot of these bills that have been coming out of Sacramento, and a lot these last couple of years, while they took advantage of the lockdowns and didn't get the pushback, because one, people weren't able to show up in person, so they didn't have to face people down, any opposition. But two, most of us were distracted. We're pushing back against mandates and lockdowns and blah, blah, blah. We weren't really paying attention. So all of these bills came out just reducing local control. And again, kind of going back to how I'm in the position of mayor, contentious things. We had this housing project that landed on us, and we had no say. Citizens were pissed off. They demanded that we have a say, and we're like, no, we literally don't have any say. So all of that to say that now that we can start going up to Sacramento in person, and I've been developing the relationships with our legislatures. I'm on the board with our League of Cities, which is kind of a collective group of all the cities up and down California and nationwide, but we've got California League of Cities. So I'm on the board for my division, and then I got put on the legislative committee. So really just using my title and trying to push that weight around a little bit more for opposition against these different bills that are coming through, especially right now while they're in committees. I can go and be witness and testify against them, and really hope that we can sway things. So I think while I'm still focused on local stuff, I'm going to take the fight up to Sacramento as much as I can, and fight for the local stuff that way.
Well, that sounds great. We're all getting close to the end of the show, and there's two quick questions. I wanted to double barrel these and put them to you together right at the end here. But one, are you planning to run again or for future offices? And two, what advice would you give somebody else who's sitting out here and saying, I want to make a difference? How do I go about that? What advice would you give to somebody?
So the first one, I do plan on running again for my seat. So that would be in 2024. And then I would like to eventually bump up to Board of Supervisors as well. So start working more on the county level. Again, kind of to go into the next question, we're still building up our resume. So building up our grassroots movement to prove that we can govern as libertarians and do it well. So I think, my advice to people wanting to run, look into Kara Schultz and her training. There's a wealth of knowledge there. Brent Olson and myself, we've started up a political consulting company. And so we're helping out with, we've actually got 3 campaigns that we're running this season, and advising on a couple others too. So we're happy to help with anybody who's wanting to run. And then, other than that, I think you have to get involved with the local issues, showing up at council meetings, networking, getting to know the movers and shakers in town. And then, after that too, just getting a good solid campaign team behind you.
Well, that all sounds like awesome advice. And unfortunately, this has been a great show, but we're at the end of the time. So we're going to have to wind it up there. But thanks so much for joining us, Kalish. And we'll hope to see you at the next one. And until then, stay free.
Thank you, Kalish. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.